Ladies and gentlemen, it's a Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have a distinguished guest, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you for sure. I just want to let you know that we just finished a show on Pod TV when we were talking about international affairs or so on. And I was asked a question by one of the regulars on the show. He's a lawyer in the United States. And he asked me a question is that why US and Ukraine finished the war right away by Zelensky admitting that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO and the war would be over. What my reply was that the war could be over indeed by a statement of Zelensky. And Putin will add that, of course, all the territories that already controlled by Russia should remain with Russia. Plus, it would be nice gesture of Ukraine to give also Kharkiv and Odessa, just to make a solid peace. And for how long that solid peace will last? Say about, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months? I don't think 8 months is going to last. 4 to 6, maybe, because it will give Russia enough time to accumulate and have the mobilization of even more force. They can get army of, say, 500,000 or maybe even 1,000,000 strong, and they will keep producing their little tanks and all this weaponry and ammunitions and so on. So what is the then outcome? So there is, of course, you cannot agree to such a peace, and you have to continue the war. Now, the war can go over for next year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, just name it. So what's the exit from this situation? And in my opinion, there was very good article, I think in Foreign Affairs that I read, that they recommend the way finish the war is to show Mr. Putin resolve of the West to keep going on with Ukraine and that war as long as needed, but more importantly so, to prove to Putin that West, with 800 million population, advanced technology in every respect, that they can easily overproduce Russia. They can produce more weaponry and more quality and quantity of weaponry in every respect. And not just do it, but also put Putin on notice. Mr. Putin, okay, here is what we would like you to take a note of. On this factory, we produce 2,000 tanks, and on this factory, we produce several Storm Shadow missiles. And here, we are delivering ATACMS. You know how many? 2,500 this month and 5,500 next month. Mr. Putin, what do you think about that? Any comments? Oh, by the way, if you think that you can deal with that, remember, if that's not enough, we will use nuclear bombs against you, Mr. Putin. Do you think you can get a bluff and tell us every hour and a half that you are going to use nuclear power bombs? We can do the same and much more than you, Mr. Putin. Now, talk to me, Mr. Putin. What are you going to say? Jonathan, what do you think?
I see very little to disagree with you on that, on what you've just said, except that I would also add that, if you're talking about tactical nuclear strikes using your missile forces, we have very, very strong ballistic missile defenses, as we have already demonstrated. You do not know how many of your nuclear missile strikes would actually get through our operational level defenses. And oh, by the way, Mr. Putin, we do have the capability to produce and the possible intent to construct a global ballistic missile defense system, which would completely neutralize your entire nuclear missile arsenal, as well as that of your ally, China, North Korea, Iran. And then you have no nuclear weapons that would be able to get through our shield or threaten any of our populations. Oh, one might get through. Yes, it was even if one got through, how many of our nuclear missiles could you block in return? The answer is few to none. So, in any case, I agree with everything you're saying as far as that goes. But I would also add that to tell Mr. Putin that we know what you fear. You fear the potential of our technology to neutralize the one thing that makes you a great power in your own perception, your nuclear missile arsenal. We can, given the political will and the decision to do so, construct a worldwide strategic defense matrix. Wisdom, if you want a snappy acronym to go with that. But we can basically construct a system that will neutralize your nuclear missile arsenals. And therefore, and that ends the game right there.
And it could lead to unbelievable situations. There will be a Kartash peace imposed on Putin while he still has some nuclear weapons.
Right.
That's never happened in the history of the world.
Yeah.
That nuclear power would be dictated Carthage peace.
But that is because until recent years, the means for neutralizing nuclear missiles systemically across the board did not really exist. However, with the introduction of advanced laser weaponry, the demonstrated capabilities of intermediate range ballistic missile defenses, as well as the potential of an upgraded U.S. Space Force, which few, if any, people have looked at as a viable possibility. But I will be willing to bet you that was one of the things that Elon Musk and former President Trump were discussing when they had that meeting. They didn't say what they were talking about, but an educated guess was that both men each have something that the other wants.
Yeah,
Monetary
some
support.
people believe that they discuss how to prepare Spanish omelette. I think they're wrong. I don't think they discuss it.
No. Given the fact that President Trump, former President Trump, had started the U.S. Space Force, and given the fact that Elon Musk has the means easily to bring that Space Force to its full potential by providing and constructing and selling to the Pentagon a space fleet, and that space fleet would be capable of executing all of the planetary defense missions as well as ballistic missile defense missions necessary to make the the NATO alliance essentially dominant for the rest of the 21st century. And that is the potential that Russia fears most. Is if given that Mr. Trump, if former President Trump becomes president this November, remember the same person that inaugurated the Space Force could well authorize the upgrading of the U.S. Space Force and bring it to its full potential. So there is a great opportunity for genuine strategic surprise, what I would describe as the strategy of asymmetric response.
Absolutely. And what makes asymmetric response possible? Again, because of the science, technology is so superior the West to Russia. Now, lately, I've read and listened to some interviews of so-called useful idiots, and some people are quite not noticed. For example, like Professor Jeffrey Sachs and some others, and I've listened to his interview, and the person who conducted the interview, he says, "But Professor Sachs, why West hates Russia? For why? What for?" So that's funny question. So he started to talk something about that after Perestroika, the West was not really fulfilled its duties to help Russia, and instead it started to enlarge NATO and so on. So the West, it was their fault that led to today's situation, or so on. Professor Sachs should know history. He should know that Russia was enemy of the West 50 years ago and 100 years ago and 200 and even 500 years ago, even before the United States became a country. What's happened is that the Jeffrey Sachs probably would argue that how dare you say so? They were on our side during Second World War or so on. Oh, Professor Sachs in 1939 did
They weren't
so
on
he
our side.
fight Germany on the side with English army and so on. I don't recall that. It did not happen. In fact, they participated in carving the Poland, taking the Baltic states and Western Belarus or Western Ukraine and part of Romania, Moldova and Transylvania and all that stuff.
Not to mention the Winter War against Finland.
Oh, Finland, yeah. And finally, the Winter War against Finland. So, they were actually against the West. They were on the side with Hitler. And only when Hitler attacked them in June of 1941, they became on our side fighting the Hitler. But by necessity, it wasn't by design. It wasn't that they cooperated with Hitler, but actually they were trying to play against Hitler. No, Hitler makes them play against Germany. So, and guess what? Right after the war, 4 years later, they started the blockade of West Berlin. What what kind of friends are these? Are these Western friends to blockade Berlin? So U.S. had to organize this bridge to supply West Berlin, otherwise it would be a hopeless situation. And it was actually it created casus belli, and U.S. if it wanted to, they could use it to um, probably phone to Mr. Stalin and say, "Hello, Joe. Okay, we'll give you 48 hours to take out all your blockade of West Berlin because, baby, we have something what been tried, I believe, in Japan in 1945. Uncle Joe, you want to follow the path and become
Yeah.
next one?"
Unfortunately, that at that point of the Berlin airlift, at that time, the United States had not begun to build up its strategic nuclear stockpile. They did
Yeah,
not do so actually until 1953. Yeah,
yes.
we essentially between the end of that, we were pretty much shadow boxing with the rest of the world as far as the nuclear. The rest of the world thought we had all of these nuclear weapons already produced and ready to use, and we didn't. We had the delivery means to be sure, but these were bombers, and we had them stationed in Western Europe. So yes, we did have a theoretical capability, but we did not actually begin to produce nuclear weapons in significant numbers until, interestingly enough, until after the end of the Korean War, when President Eisenhower threatened to use nuclear weapons to end the Korean War, and to the Chinese, he was very credible. They believed Eisenhower. He was very credible. If he said he was thinking of using nuclear weapons, they absolutely believed that he would. And so they decided to end the Korean War and come to an armistice. It depends upon the credibility and the perception of the credibility of a given leader. And so in this case, if given the outcome, projected outcome of this November's presidential election, uh, while Ukraine still has very much under its control its own destiny, and we are seeing increasing indications that Crimea is in danger of becoming logistically isolated as well as cut off from any further reinforcement. The stage is being set, I would contend, for a decisive Ukrainian counteroffensive to cut off the Crimea and restore Crimea to Ukrainian control. And that will be the decisive moment in this particular war.
Basically, last few days were absolutely fantastic for Ukraine. So they signed a treaty with the United States and several other countries. They got a pledge of $50 billion. I think it's interest on Russian money arrested in
Yes.
Western
Yeah,
bank.
the interest that we generated from the assets that we would be effectively be seizing, and that will provide a substantial amount of revenue for Ukrainian resupply and Ukrainian reconstruction efforts.
Yeah, that's fantastic news. And Ukrainians are still continue to attack Russian targets, specifically in Crimea. And something tells me that it's not happening by accident.
Oh,
I
well.
think yeah, I think it's from strategy of war, and especially upcoming attack on Crimea to retake it. I think it's very reasonable to expect that that's exactly what Ukrainians are set up to do. What do you think, Jonathan?
Oh, I think again, I agree with you absolutely on this. The stage is being set, and the number of an increasing number of Western analysts are beginning to realize that the Ukrainians actually have a real shot at achieving a significant operational victory in this war, one that would one that the Russians would not be able to explain away. They can't wouldn't be able to disguise it, explain it away. They couldn't say, "Oh yeah, we really intended to do that. This is a part of a clever strategy to lure the Ukrainians into a trap." Yeah, right. Preemptive surrender. You're
Something
going to
about
surrender. Go
surrender,
ahead.
Jonathan. Something about surrender. I enjoyed tremendously interview with Victor uh, um, Hansen on Hoover Institute.
Oh yes, Dr. Hansen. Yes.
Dr. Hansen, and he just wrote a new book, The Death of Everything,
Oh
where he
yes.
showed four examples of the fifth civilization, which was completely destroyed and taken out by Alexander the Great, and why he did that. And because the Thebans, they treated him as a barbarian, that even if he will defeat them, their culture and is so much superior to them that they will take over the Macedonian, will bring their culture. And he said something to the effect the dead don't have any culture, they're just dead. And he completely destroyed and killed all the humans. And that civilization never, ever was able to get out of the ruins. And although there were some attempts to create a new Thebans and so on, but it was not the same and never became to prominence or so on. The second example, of course, is Carthage, the Third Punic War, where the Romans first said, "Okay, we want all your fleet." They agreed, "Okay, you can have all our fleet." Okay, now we want you move from the sea for 25 kilometers. Okay, we are going to move to the sea. Now we want to take all your arms and weapons and everything what you have. Okay, we'll give you weapons or so on. And it didn't help. The Carthage, as we know, in spite of everything what they agreed and delivered, didn't help them. It was completely destroyed, taken out, all people killed, and there was never more Carthage culture again. The language was ceased to exist and so on. And the same here shows further with Constantinople. When Turks took the city, and they didn't destroy the city, by the way. In this case, they just destroyed all the defenders, and that's the only thing that happened because they saw that the city is so beautiful that it would be a shame to destroy it, and they rather have their citizens to use that city, and that's what's happened. And finally, Cortes, Mexico, the Aztecs being completely reduced to rubble, eliminated, destroyed, killed, and so on. There was never the Aztec language or culture. So sometimes it happens. And now, if you are taking the next 500 years, it brings us right to our time. So something could be that maybe Russians calculated that if they will not be able to get Ukraine, they will just destroy it, and there will be no such country. Mr. Putin, prove it. Okay, so you have your some thoughts, some strategies, some examples of history that they're now our brothers. Now you're killing our brothers. It's like almost from the Bible scenario. But now prove it. Okay, come on, Mr. Putin, prove it. talk about it and now prove it. He can't. He doesn't have the power necessary for that. Now, finally, if you remember Second World War, the end of the war was, and the war finished instantly when Germany unconditionally surrendered. So did Japan a few days after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks. Unconditionally surrendered. Something tells me that in a situation in Israel, anything short of unconditional surrender and release all the hostages, there will be no peace. Because I've learned about how these four hostages were released. They were kept not by Hamas, they were kept and tortured by Palestinian citizens. So now, whoever going to tell me that, oh, okay, so Hamas attacked the Israel, but Palestinians didn't do it. They were, they're just peaceful citizens. They are not guilty of anything. You know what? It's all BS and enough of it. Okay? Because any Palestinians, if you will give him the rifle, he's becoming Hamas. What's the difference between Palestinian and Hamas? What Hamas? What are they Chinese? Are they Russians? No, those are Palestinians who have weapons. Okay, so any Palestinians who will take weapon is becoming Hamas, and they are using the horrible strategy of hiding among peaceful citizens, which leads to catastrophic consequences. By the way, I want to mention that I've learned a little bit more about this release of these four hostages. Apparently, they were preparing that for a month. And by the way, United States helped them with information and certain data, and they, for a month, they were not only studying in which buildings they are located, but even in which room and even what part of the room they're located. They've learned how often they change the guards there. So they were prepared, and furthermore, they had to create the attack exactly simultaneously, so they wouldn't tell the other side that okay, there is Israelis attacking, be prepared. So they had to do it exactly, precisely at the same time, and they did it. By the way, there were some Palestinians suffered as a result of that attack, because of course Hamas resisted that. Okay, so you got your hostages. Okay, get out of here, and that's the industry. No, no, they wanted to fight. And what's happened, actually, one Israeli was killed during this attack. Palestinians were killed, many more than one, as we know. But what's interesting is that most of them were killed on their market, on the bazaar. So, in a country which blames that there are no food, that everybody is suffering and starving to death, no, there is a market where you can buy almost anything. These families that were hosting the Israeli captives, they all had fantastic food. They didn't feed their captives, and they tortured them, but they ate very, very well. Okay, so all the stories about starving Palestinians or so on is garbage, absolutely. And by the way, Israel is delivering every day as much food as they can carry, and they do deliver. The other thing is that Hamas is taking all this food to themselves and not don't give enough food to Palestinians, but that's a different story. So I think that under this new information, what I'm getting, I don't think that there could be any peace short of unconditional surrender and release of all hostages, both dead and alive, if they're still alive. That's my opinion on the subject. I don't want you to. support my opinion. But you can say anything.
Look, I mean, I find essentially, logically, I find nothing to disagree with you on that, especially when you have, in the case of, there is a common denominator between the conflict in Russia, a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The common denominator is there is no one side desires the complete destruction of the other. The
Absolutely.
Russia wants Ukraine to cease to exist, and Hamas wants Israel to cease to exist. There's no compromise there. It's not Ukraine. Neither Ukraine nor Israel is going to voluntarily agree to give up its own existence. It's just that which just insanity.
Not going to
So
happen.
they have no choice but to use sufficient force, decisive force, to utterly defeat these opposing forces so that they are incapable of carrying out their desired objective to destroy the opponent as a political entity. And so the war is going to continue, at least in the case of Russia and Ukraine, until Ukraine is able to inflict that decisive counterattack, take away Crimea, and thus create enormous political as well as military pressure on Russia to agree to an armistice. That is as much as what the Russians will be willing to agree to. They'll simply use their propaganda machine to say, okay, our special military operation was successful. We're declaring victory and going home. So, and they will retreat, and then we in the West, we will welcome Ukraine with open arms into NATO and the European Union, and hopefully begin the construction of that global ballistic missile defense system, which will go a long way towards preventing the emergence of future major conflicts, at least those initiated by Russia, and certainly, hopefully, by its allies, China, North Korea, or Iran, if you have a sophisticated ballistic missile defense system in place.
Yeah. Jonathan, I'd like to ask you that the major difference between these two wars is that in Ukraine, it's Russia directly attacks and fights Ukraine, and Israel, Hamas, they are on a background. However, they are now conducting the kind of like military exercises in the Mediterranean Sea with Egyptians. How you view that in this present situation? Decision of Russia to do this Egyptians exercises.
They really don't. They really don't have the power projection capability to engage in anything more than a symbolic exercise. It's not a serious power projection effort on the part of Russia. They don't have any serious attempt, anything resembling a serious attempt by Russia to project military power into that area would be very quickly destroyed by the U.S. naval forces there. The Russian naval forces would have a very brief and exciting existence.
Yeah, I must admit that Egyptians generals are very brave people if they to participate.
And the Egyptians would very quickly lose interest in being a military power involved in that kind of conflict. So I just don't see it. I see it as symbolic saber rattling, and again an attempt to play on the fears of Western nations, fears of escalation, which that argument is beginning to wear very thin.
So the most curious thing before we finish, I'd like to mention that that very interesting peace proposal, which is some people saying it's coming from the United States, some people say that it was Israel who initiated that. All Arab countries, with Qatar and everybody else, agreed to that proposal, which would include the creation of a second state, the Palestinian state, whatever it is. And the only people who didn't agree to that was Hamas. They said that, oh, yeah, generally it's a good proposal, but it lacks this and it needs this and that. And now they need guarantees, but not only by United States, but also by Turkey, Russia, China, and Iran, and a few other countries, which is unachievable. How you can make all these countries together agreed on anything? You know? So it is Hamas who is resisting in there. Although I have my doubts that Israel agreed fully with this proposal, but however they decided to keep it quiet for now. But it was Hamas who is derailing this attempt. So this is the most pathetic thing. What they are hoping, what's their game plan? Basically it's a political game to show all over the world through student strikes, through all kind of other means, social media, and to keep it going. Because with each day there are less and less alive Hamas people around. That's a reality. And in the meantime, surprisingly enough, Israel is now preparing attack on Lebanon because they had more than enough attacks from Lebanon by Hezbollah and all the stuff, and I think it's getting on their nerves, and they decided to prepare. And I think we're talking about weeks, but most likely days left before Israel will attack Lebanon and will take out. They took out one commander, and I heard the commentary that he was instrumental to mounting the attacks against Israelis, and they have well over 100,000 displaced persons in Israel because of these attacks or so on. It's about time to finish that. And Israel is very familiar with Lebanese territory and the way everything is there. I don't think it will be a great struggle for Israel to take over the Lebanon. And Lebanon, all they want to become the state that they were several years ago, when it was a resort on the Mediterranean Sea, and they had beautiful hotels, casinos, and they had fantastic. It was Levant, and it was a fantastic place. And look at what's happened there now,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But anyway, we are, of course, on a crossroads in Ukrainian war, and I think Putin even doesn't understand with all what's happened now with ruble. The official course is still 91 rubles per dollar, but you cannot find dollar by paying 200 rubles. It's just not there. Sorry, we just don't have it. 250? Well, maybe you can buy a few dollars at 250 rubles per dollar, but not for 200. And this official course of 91.
Well, Sasha, that reminds me of many years ago in 1992 when I visited Moscow under the aegis of a project, and I met up with my American and British colleagues there. And all of us went out to this, after we had done touring, looking around Moscow, we went out to this one Russian restaurant on the outskirts of Moscow. My colleagues had found this place, and it was a very nice restaurant. And to give you an idea, the exchange rate at that time was 90 rubles to the dollar. Okay? So 90 rubles to, now wait for it. We ordered a 5-course Russian meal, with all the appetizers, all vodka, everything, all the other good stuff. This is for 5 people. Now, in American dollars, if you were to order a 5-course Russian meal of this scale in the United States at a quote unquote Russian restaurant, how much would it cost you in American dollars? Guess.
400.
About $400. You say, okay, that's a reasonable guess. And when the bill came for us, it was in rubles, and I looked at that and I did a back of the envelope calculation in my mind about, okay, how does this translate based on the exchange rate? That meal for 5 people, 5-course meal with vodka and all the stuff that would have cost $400, you say, in the United States, cost $18. $18. And Sasha, that was when the Russian economy had not yet gone down as far as it was going to, because I was talking about in 1992. By 1998, when the Russian currency had declined so far, it was
Was it
the exchange.
default?
It was they would get they it was getting ready. They had to devalue the currency and knock off several zeros because the exchange rate was around 5,000 rubles to the dollar.
Yes,
And
yes.
that same meal would have, for 5 people, would have cost you virtually pennies. You could get change back from your dollar. You could get change back from your dollar for that meal for 5.
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
So, well, let's hope that Putin is not as stupid as he looks. Hopefully,
I'm
he
not sure that's
will.
possible. I'm not sure that's possible.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then West and Ukraine, of course, will try to explain to Mr. Putin. There are sometimes children who are very stubborn, and you have to teach them a lesson before they will start to understand, right?
Sasha, the late Albert Einstein said it best. He said, "Only two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity." And I'm not so sure about
Oh.
the universe. He said he wasn't so sure. He was not sure about the universe.
Wow, brilliantly said, of course, well, by brilliant man. Jonathan, thank you so much for today's program. I hope we'll have even better news on Tuesday.
The trends are all moving in the right direction, Sasha. I mean,
Absolutely.
and an increasing number of Western analysts who formerly were talking about how Ukraine is going to lose this war and that we better negotiate with Russia, uh, they are all they are quickly coming to realize their own foolishness.
Oh, it's quickly reminded me about our friend Dr. Mersheimer, who is a
Oh
proponent
yes,
of great power war and says the smaller power should never ever confront the great power because obviously it will lead. First of all, I don't understand his logic. Okay, against Ukraine, Russia is a theory of great power, which is now is crumbling. It's all of a sudden the great power cannot do anything against small power. Now in Israel, it's exactly reverse situation. The Israel is perceived, I think, is a great power in that region, and the small power attacked it. So how the professor explains that in this situation he is on the side of a small power, a little power, instead of against great power, and vice versa in Ukraine Russia conflict, and which is doesn't work. So his theory right now is scrambling. I don't really see what supports it. It's absolutely incredible.
yeah. The great power, in this case, the great power Israel, is totally unwilling to give up its own existence, which is what the smaller power is essentially demanding.
Hmm.
And
How dare they are? How dare they are to defend their territory? That's hope. But the same thing happened for the last, I don't know, 80 years since 1948. Uh, they started to build their own country, and they achieved very quickly their own statehood. And look at what the Palestinians or Arabs, I don't know what's the right way to call them, they never built anything. They just kept attacking Israel. Once, twice, 56, three times, 67, four times, 72. So, and now again, that's quite strange. So now we have to reread Victor Hansen to see how it works, really. Well, that's enough for today. We'll talk to you more on Tuesday, same place, same time. Have a great weekend, everybody, and glory to Ukraine. Bye bye, everybody.